For nearly 2,000 years, a group of ancient Roman scrolls sat in silence, locked away by fire, ash, and time. These scrolls came from the Roman town of Herculaneum, a place that shared the same terrible fate as Pompeii when Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 AD. Although Pompeii gets most of the attention today, Herculaneum hides a far stranger and more frustrating mystery. When the volcano exploded, it didn't just destroy buildings and lives. It buried an entire library, sealing its contents under layers of hardened volcanic material and turning fragile papyrus scrolls into blackened, brittle lumps that looked more like charcoal than books. For centuries, these scrolls refused to give up their secrets. Scholars knew they mattered because they were ancient, rare, and possibly priceless, but knowing that didn't make them readable. The heat from the eruption flash-burned the papyrus, carbonizing it so completely that any attempt to unroll the scrolls by hand caused them to crumble into dust. Even though the scrolls survived physically, they became functionally useless, locked in a cruel middle state where they existed but could not be read. The story of their discovery almost feels accidental. In the 1700s, a farmer digging a well struck something solid underground. That something turned out to be the roof of a massive Roman villa buried beneath nearly 80 feet of volcanic debris. Treasure hunters tunneled through the darkness, pulling out marble statues and decorative objects. But deep inside the structure, later called the Villa of the Papyri, they uncovered something far more valuable than gold. Around 1,800 papyrus scrolls were found stacked together, forming the only complete ancient library ever discovered. At first glance, the scrolls didn't look like much. They appeared burned beyond recognition, reduced to dark, cracked cylinders. But scholars quickly realized what they were seeing. These weren't random documents. They were texts from the ancient world, possibly containing lost works of philosophy, literature, and history. Some even believed the library could have belonged to the family of Julius Caesar himself, because the villa's luxury suggested connections to Rome's elite. If that were true, these scrolls might include works by Aristotle, lost plays by Sophocles, or first-hand accounts of events that shaped Western civilization. But hope kept crashing into reality. Every method used to open the scrolls failed. Chemical treatments destroyed them. Manual separation ruined them. Each failed attempt meant losing irreplaceable knowledge forever. Scholars could sometimes see faint impressions of letters pressed into the carbonized surface, which made the situation even more painful because the text was clearly there, just out of reach. The frustration grew decade by decade. The Herculaneum Scrolls became famous not only for what they might contain, but also for how completely inaccessible they were. The big question stayed the same. How do you read something that falls apart the moment you touch it? That question eventually reached Brent Seals, a computer scientist at the University of Kentucky. He didn't start out trying to solve ancient Roman mysteries. His background was in restoring damaged medieval manuscripts using computer algorithms. He specialized in reconstructing texts that scholars had given up on, filling in missing letters and piecing together fragments digitally. When he heard about the Herculaneum Scrolls, he saw them as the ultimate challenge. These weren't torn pages or faded ink. They were fully preserved texts that no one could access. Seals believed the solution wouldn't come from archaeology alone, but from medical imaging. Doctors can see inside the human body without surgery, so why couldn't scientists look inside a scroll without unrolling it? The idea was simple in theory. Technologies like CT scans detect density differences in materials. Papyrus and ink have different densities, so a powerful enough scan might reveal text layer by layer. If those layers could be mapped digitally, software could then unroll the scroll virtually, revealing its contents on a screen. But practice proved far harder than theory. The volcanic heat had carbonized both the papyrus and the ink, making them chemically similar. Standard X-rays couldn't tell the difference between writing and background. Still, Seals didn't quit. He realized he needed imaging technology far more powerful than anything found in hospitals. That search led him to synchrotron radiation, an advanced form of X-ray produced by electrons racing around massive rings at near light speed. These beams are billions of times stronger than medical X-rays and can detect incredibly subtle differences in material structure. Seals published papers and asked for funding, but he ran into a major obstacle. He couldn't access the scrolls. The Naples National Library, which housed most of the Herculaneum collection, refused to let him scan them. The scrolls were considered too fragile, too valuable, and too risky to expose to experimental methods. So even though Seals had the tools and the vision, he didn't have permission. The irony was brutal. The technology to read the unreadable might exist, but institutional caution kept it locked away. While Seals struggled for access, two Italian researchers stepped in. Vito Moscella, a physicist from Naples, and Graziano Ranocchia, a papyrologist who worked daily with scroll fragments, both grew up aware of the Herculaneum mystery. They had read Seals' work and understood the promise of synchrotron imaging. Because of their local connections and academic ties, they managed to secure permission to scan several scrolls at a European synchrotron facility in France. Their work made headlines. Moscella published images that appeared to show individual Greek letters embedded in the scrolls. Ranocchia went further, claiming he could see entire phrases from philosophical texts. The idea that readable text had finally been detected electrified the academic world. After centuries of silence, the scrolls seemed to be speaking again. But Seals wasn't convinced. He knew how easily the human brain finds patterns where none exist. Without clear, verifiable text that could be independently confirmed, shadows and shapes weren't enough. He applied the same rigorous standards he used in his own work and found the Italian results uncertain. Still, they had proven one crucial thing. Synchrotron scanning could see inside the scrolls. The door was open, even if no one had fully stepped through it yet. Locked out of Herculaneum, Seals looked elsewhere to prove his method. That chance came from Israel, where archaeologists had discovered a charred scroll fragment in a burned synagogue near the Dead Sea. Known as the En-Gedi scroll, it dated to around 600 AD and looked like a lump of coal. Previous attempts to unroll it had failed completely. If Seals could extract readable text from this fragment, it would change everything. Using high-resolution micro-CT scans, Seals and his team spent months refining their algorithms. They analyzed the scroll layer by layer, pixel by pixel, searching for microscopic density differences that could indicate ink. Then came the breakthrough. Clear Hebrew letters appeared on the screen, not vague shapes, but readable text. The scroll contained verses from the book of Leviticus, making it one of the oldest biblical texts ever recovered. That success shifted the entire conversation. What once looked like burned debris turned out to be a priceless document restored after 1,500 years. Journals that had doubted Seals now embraced his work. Museums that had refused him began to reconsider. Most importantly, the En-Gedi scroll proved that carbonized texts weren't necessarily lost forever. If a damaged synagogue scroll could be read, then the Herculaneum library might also be unlocked. The impossible had become merely difficult. And as this momentum built, artificial intelligence entered the picture. Machine learning researchers realized the problem was perfect for AI. Unlike traditional algorithms, AI systems can learn patterns on their own. Given enough data, they can distinguish real text from background noise far better than humans. By training neural networks on thousands of scroll fragments, researchers taught AI to recognize ancient ink even when heat had altered it. The combination of powerful imaging, advanced algorithms, and machine learning brought the ancient world closer than ever. After 2,000 years of silence, the Herculaneum Scrolls were no longer just burned relics. They were finally on the verge of being read. Over time, researchers slowly built an intuitive sense of how ancient text was supposed to behave on a page. They learned how letters naturally flowed into one another, how spacing worked, and how words were arranged, even though the original material had been damaged beyond anything readable by the human eye. This understanding didn't come from a single moment of inspiration, but from years of studying fragments, patterns, and failed attempts. But the real shift happened when artificial intelligence entered the picture, because AI could see what humans simply couldn't. The major breakthrough arrived when advanced AI algorithms processed new ultra-detailed scans of the Herculaneum Scrolls. Earlier scans had produced nothing more than vague shadows and questionable shapes that scholars argued over endlessly. But this time, the neural networks managed to extract clean, readable text from the carbonized papyrus. For the first time since Mount Vesuvius erupted nearly 2,000 years ago, complete words, full sentences, and even entire paragraphs became visible. It was one of those moments where history suddenly felt very close, as if voices from the ancient world were speaking directly to modern readers. The decoded passages revealed philosophical discussions, literary fragments, and historical references that immediately grabbed the attention of classicists. These weren't just dry academic texts either. They were living thoughts, preserved by volcanic fire and brought back through modern technology. Each new line added something fresh to our understanding of Roman intellectual life, filling in gaps that historians had assumed would remain empty forever. But while the main texts were impressive, the real excitement came from what the AI uncovered beyond the obvious writing. Ancient scribes often wrote in the margins, squeezing in notes, corrections, and side comments. These markings created an ongoing scholarly conversation layered over the original work. Before AI, most of this was completely invisible. Now those marginal notes could finally be read, and in many cases they turned out to be even more valuable than the main text. They showed how ancient scholars argued, questioned ideas, and responded to one another, revealing the human side of ancient learning rather than just polished philosophical arguments. What made this discovery especially powerful was that these comments and debates had been hidden for centuries. Suddenly, modern researchers could see ancient disagreements, curiosity, and uncertainty written directly into the scrolls. It created a strange but powerful connection between people separated by 2 millennia. AI hadn't just translated text. It had exposed layers of meaning that traditional archaeology might never have uncovered, and that changed how scholars thought about what was possible. The implications quickly expanded beyond Herculaneum. If AI could read these scrolls, then other damaged manuscripts around the world might also be unlocked. Burned libraries, water-damaged codices, and fragile papyri could potentially give up their secrets using similar techniques. What once seemed like isolated success started to look like a revolution in the study of ancient texts. As decoding continued, the scrolls revealed their contents piece by piece. Most of the text turned out to be Greek philosophical works, which made sense given the status of the Roman library they came from. But although scholars expected philosophy, they didn't expect the specific authors and works that emerged. Some texts appeared to be previously unknown writings by familiar thinkers, while others introduced entirely new voices from the ancient world. Among the most important discoveries were early commentaries on Epicurean philosophy, possibly written by students who had learned directly from Epicurus or his immediate followers. These weren't simple copies of known works. They were original compositions that explored ideas about pleasure, happiness, and existence in ways scholars had never seen before. Because of this, long-standing assumptions about Epicurean thought had to be reconsidered. Other scrolls seemed to contain private letters exchanged between philosophers and scholars. These personal documents offered a rare glimpse into how ideas moved through ancient social networks. They showed debates unfolding over time, friendships shaping intellectual development, and individuals influencing entire generations. The philosophical systems historians had studied for centuries suddenly felt more personal and more human. Some fragments even hinted at connections to early Christian thought. Although no explicitly Christian texts had been confirmed, certain themes echoed ideas that later became central to Christian theology. This suggested that the intellectual world of the early Roman Empire was far more interconnected than previously believed, with ideas flowing freely between different traditions rather than existing in isolation. Acceptance grew stricter. Still, the question was no longer whether the scrolls could be read. That mystery had been solved. Now the real questions were how fast the decoding could continue, how complete it could become, and who would guide the process. Looking ahead, the breakthrough represented more than just reading ancient scrolls. It proved that AI could unlock historical secrets traditional methods couldn't reach. The same techniques were already being adapted for damaged medieval manuscripts, fragile papyri, and worn inscriptions. In Italy, plans to expand excavation at the Villa of the Papyri hinted at hundreds more scrolls still buried underground. What had once seemed like an impossible challenge turned into a collaboration between cutting-edge technology and traditional scholarship. And although many secrets have already been revealed, countless others remain locked away, waiting for the next scan, the next algorithm, and the next leap forward. And that's that for today's video. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next one.